mentioned Bill George, and he says that the journey to authentic leadership begins with our understanding of our life story. So as Krista mentioned, he and his research team did extensive research to determine what made for exemplary and authentic leaders. And what they determined was that these leaders were not passive bystanders of their lives, that conversely, they were conscious observers of their life experience, and they let these life experiences inform their leading going forward. So leaders gain tremendous meaning from their life stories, and especially from the full spectrum, from everything from positive to difficult, as Krista had mentioned. And in fact, their deepest motivation came from their formative experiences. They said that they learned the most from personal illnesses, or being discriminated against, or being excluded, or from the untimely death of a dear friend or family member. That this is where their deepest passion to lead came from. So life stories shape and inspire our leading, and they inspire others.
A personal story or a personal narrative is a very powerful communication tool, and it tends to be more memorable for people than just a set of facts that they hear. So it's a story is a type of leadership language that leaders have available to them, and that story has the power to really shape how they're seen, and it has the power to influence people to, I think, listen to them and to follow them. So a few more things as we think about what this story is and why we're even talking about it for leaders. It's a process in which the leaders themselves really construct their own identity and really deepen their own self-awareness in that process. And then when they share it, they're really also helping others understand their choices, their decisions, what drives them. So it helps both the leader and then it helps others as well. You know, all of us have a compelling story to tell, I think, and any of those stories can inspire action or inspire others to think in a certain way or to act in a certain way or to be inspired to, do something with that story. But a lot of times I think leaders appeal to logos, which is more, using rationale and strategy and analysis. It's kind of the head stuff that they use all of that to try to persuade people to follow them. And when we tell a story, we add another component to that. So now we're appealing to pathos, which is much more that emotion, that heart speak. And so while it's important to have the other as well, as we try to, influence and persuade, it's also important to speak from the heart for leaders, because that tends to be when they hear the emotion and they hear the feeling and really hear you speaking from the heart, that's when they tend to pay attention and tend to be moved to follow. Stories also really allow a leader to express their values, not just as stated words, but as really a lived experience, as a leader talks about that experience. And I think people buy into that more. They understand those values and how they really shape how that leader is leading and how they're envisioning, where they want the team to go. And then lastly, I think stories reveal why we're called to serve, so our purpose. And that ties to what Peggy talked about, the practice of authentic serving.
So you'll be asked to create your own life story, and Krista will give you some guidelines on that, and we'll ask you to bring your life stories to self-mastery. And the reason we're asking you to do that is twofold. Number one, we want to give you an opportunity to uncover what shaped you as leaders. And secondly, we want you to have an opportunity to practice both authentic sharing and authentic listening.
So as Peggy said, we are going to ask you to actually create your life story in a visual manner and bring that come prepared to class, to the self-mastery module with that prepared. And then we will be working with that throughout that class. So thinking about how do I even start with this? I would suggest thinking about maybe the crucible moments of your life, the kind of the deep stuff, the times when you were challenged and you had choices to make, and there were effects of your choices on how you lived your life since and maybe on your leading. Think about those crucible moments where your values maybe were tested or your values became very clear to you. Those really transformational moments or times in your life. I think for me, one of those was when I moved to Sweden to go to a grad year program when I was about 26. And up until that time, I'd lived, in a Midwest town. It was a college town, but it was fairly isolated, in terms of the larger world perspective. And then I went to Sweden and was very exposed to a whole different kind of thinking, a whole different continent and, way of living. And that was a really crucible moment for me, very transformative, and really forced me to look at what I had held as the right way and, my values and what I really believed to be true. And not that it totally changed me as a person, but it was one of those transformative moments in my life for sure. There were some ups during that experience. There were definitely some downs during that experience. But, survived. And now I can see what that really gave me in terms of a life experience and, a really life-changing experience. So those kinds of things. It might be, Peggy mentioned a few that some of these leaders had experienced of just, maybe being excluded at some point in your life, or maybe thinking about where you were in the family and what dynamic that really created, or, deaths or divorces or marriages, or, those major points in life, children coming along, being let go from a job or some job that you had really aspired to. So any of those things will be good things to think about as you kind of, construct your own life story. So we would suggest that you do this on paper at least this size, as some of you took paper at our last session, and then use, something that's going to be visible to others because you'll be sharing this in small groups during the class time. So there are many ways that you can depict this. So I'll show you a couple and you can choose, and they don't have to be one of these two, but this is kind of a life spiral kind of visual where you could think of kind of the approaching and the receding as maybe the positives, the ups, and the negatives, the downs of life, however you wanted to use this kind of an image might be one. We've certainly had people do things that were a little more like this, where they had the highs pinpointed and marked, and then even some of the lows as they went through their lives, or just, kind of an upward spiral with different things marked. So it's not important how you do it. It's that you really spend some time thinking through the whole of your life and how you became who you are today, both as a person and also as a leader. So there may be some things in life that are very sensitive that you would rather not share in class, and we totally honor that. You will choose what you share and what you don't share, but we'd suggest that those kinds of things, that you still mark them for yourself, because they probably were transformational in some way, and they had some effect on who you are today. So just note them for yourself and know that this will be up to you in terms of how deeply you share this. Sometimes people in the past have just kind of talked through, okay,
I was born, and then I had a sister at 2, and then I had a brother at 4, and then I went to kindergarten, and I liked my teacher, and those are all good things, but try to tie it to deeper learning about yourself, not just to give us your biography, but to really talk more about the meaning of how those things affected you. So we will share these in class, and we won't have time with our limited class time to have you create these in class. So please have them done ahead of time and bring them with you, and then we'll use part of our day together to share these. And then the next step, of course, is to think about what of this life story is your story, your compelling story that would really help others understand you and really inspire them. So that will be a future step. But for now, if you'll just really think about creating this with that, not just the markers, but also the meaning behind it for your life.